This ain't over, cop. You'll see. There's an army marching this way. You can't stop any of this.
This is our home. None of this concerns you, and don't even pretend you care about what happens to us.
He is quite right, because as much as you officers want to uphold the law, the fact is you don't give a rat's ass about any of this. I'd even wager that most of New York's finest would rather see us dead. To you, we're all just losers. Isn't that what you called us? Well, look who's podcasting now.
Welcome back to another episode of Spawnography Hellspawn. I am one of your hosts, Pierce Lydon, they, them, here with, as always,
George Marston, they, them, or she, her. I feel like I was just doing every Simpson.
You were also kind of doing David S. Pumpkins.
Oh, I guess so. Yeah, I don't think about that. I don't think about David S. Pumpkins.
Oh, you don't think about that? Fine.
Well, I think about it.
I don't think about it. I think about it every day. The skeletons are part of it.
Yeah, that's true.
So the return of the freak.
We kept doing that. Return of the Freak sounds like a great album.
That'd be a Korn record.
No,
for sure.
I guess it would have to be. But if Korn did like an R&B or like an acid jazz record, actually, if Korn did acid, exactly, New Jack Swing.
Oh boy. So yeah, we're in the second two issues of this kind of four-part four-part arc that we started with 67 and 68.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the credits and things in a little bit, but how you been, buddy?
I've been sleeping great this week. It is what it is. But this morning I had to wake up and be real chipper early because I did a video interview with Patton Oswalt and Jordan Blum about a comic collection that they edited. It was a really good interview. Very, very lovely and charming people. And we had a great conversation. Funny
That's
as hell.
awesome. That's awesome. And now, to be clear, their views are represented
in at least that article
gotcha.
that will be published on my employer, Newsarama, whose views are not reflected in this podcast, which is what's interesting about it. Yeah, that's what's good to know.
How much did you talk about Spawn to them?
Not as much as I actually wanted to. I wanted to kick it into some Spawn. I did mention the great Tom Warzakowski because he lettered one of the stories that's in the collection. Awesome. There's a great issue.
A perfect segue.
I know. And I was like, I host a Spawn podcast. Let's see. Also, okay, I just found out I was expecting it to go live tomorrow. Listeners, we're recording this the evening of December 5th. And December 6th, I guess, is the official quote unquote release date, but that's in China, for Marvel Rivals, which is now live on PlayStation. And as soon as this podcast is done, you best believe I'll be missing my bedtime playing some of that shit.
Is it free?
You know what Marvel Rivals is? Oh, it's free as hell, dog.
Oh, I guess that's what I'm going to be doing as well.
Yeah, you know what it is, right?
Oh, wait, you have a PS5 now?
Yeah.
Oh, we're not friends on PS5 yet.
Oh, aren't we? Well, my screen, I'll tell you my PSN off air.
Okay.
But yeah, because our one listener
will start wanting to play games with us.
You know what it is? It's like an Overwatch type thing, but it's 7v7. And I didn't realize that it's third person, which is cool. So you can actually see your character. Anyway, I'm not going to be a shill for that, but I'm sure you'll get to read some of my opinions on that on my employer's website, because I will be writing about some of that. What's interesting is you'll see my opinions reflected on their website, but you won't hear the website's opinions reflected in this podcast.
Thank you for clarifying. I
Yeah.
think that's quite important.
Yeah.
Um,
I do that so much it seems like there must have been some like legal warning I got or something. There was not. I do need to specify that occasionally, but also it's just funny to me. So
the game that's like the Fortnites and the Overwatches and whatnot that I used to really like, and this will date me, is Team Fortress 2. That was
well,
mine. That was my
still a thriving community, I'm sure, on Steam.
really.
Probably. I know it's still played. It's still played competitively.
I used to. There was like the box that had like Portal. It had Portal, Team Fortress 2. They all came together in like a thing for Xbox 360. Again, this is like 15 years
Right.
ago or whatever. But oh my god, it was 15 years ago. Jesus
Ugh.
Christ. And it was great, but then I kept playing it, and then people started like I don't know, mods went to sleep, and so people started like adding hacks and stuff into the game. So like sometimes you enter into a game and like everybody had like no gravity or like could jump through the sky. It was great.
My roommate Adam and I, we both used to play a lot of Call of Duty World at War, which was like a World War II era Call of Duty on Xbox 360, and it was really fun and challenging. And then,
That's
like
crazy.
by
They
the
made
end
a
of the
sequel
life
to the
cycle,
First World War.
I know, right? The first one they nailed it. They should have just stopped there. Perfect World War, as far as I'm concerned. As World Wars go, it's the first and best. No. But by the end of that, once they came out with later games, if you went back and tried to play that, there was again just people flying through the air, like spinning around, shooting flames, and they're like invincible. And they got fucking laser eyes or something. So,
Incredible.
Yeah.
Shout out to all the modders who are out there making games better.
Yeah.
When companies decide, we're not going to pay attention to what's going on there, but we're not going to shut the servers down. So like you won't get banned for hacking them a little bit.
Okay. Before we get into the issue, there was one other thing I wanted to bring up that is Spawn related. This is a Spawn topic. This is for us Spawnosaurs. I keep forgetting this. We talked about talking about it like 3 times in a row. Like 4 weeks ago, someone asked us, or 5 weeks ago, what is Al Simmons' music taste? And I'm finally remembering to talk about it because I think it's a funny question. Because we have to remember he died in 1987.
It's true.
So he died listening to Prince.
Yeah. So it'd have to be like Prince, Michael Jackson.
Yeah. Probably, honestly, probably was Guns N' Roses, was Appetite for Destruction out yet? Was that 87?
I want to say yes.
Yeah, 1987. So he was definitely, when Al Simmons was on his way to a fight, he was either listening to fucking Appetite for Destruction or he was listening to not Purple Rain, but like definitely something by Prince, or he could have been on a throwback with Wanda on some like Teddy Pendergrass shit.
I like that. What did I even say when we were talking about this the last time? I think I said that I think that Terry Fitzgerald likes Steely Dan.
Yeah, he seems like
would have gotten Al Simmons into Steely Dan.
That's disgusting. I think that
show some respect for Steely Dan. Listen, Steely Dan is good.
Respect for Steely Dan.
Steely Dan's good. And also, Al Simmons was out there doing the U.S. government's dirty work.
That's true. He was doing that. You know what? You gave me Thor: Love and Thunder. I will give you the fucking
the Steely Dan of Steely Dan movies.
I almost said the Doobie Brothers.
Hey, Michael McDonald.
You know what though?
You're gonna love my recommendation later. Okay, I'm not gonna spoil it.
Okay, great. Well, you know what the other thing is though? He was definitely in New York in the 70s and 80s. Al Simmons was definitely listening to some great hip hop, probably some Africa Bambaataa.
Oh yeah,
maybe some Grandmaster Flash. I bet. Run DMC for sure.
Run
Beastie
DMC was
Boys?
banging in 87. Yeah, I guess they were pretty good starting out then. Beastie Boys, by the way, are not just pretty good, they're incredible. But, in the late 80s, they might have been breaking through at that point. Yeah, on
Paul's
tour with
Boutique, right?
Madonna.
Is
Yeah.
Paul's Boutique right after Al dies, or it might be right after Al dies. He might
Hmm.
not have ever listened to Paul's Boutique.
Wow, he might have missed the Beastie Boys renaissance. Into Beastie Men. Wow. R.I.P. MCA.
Yeah, he does miss Paul's Boutique. Paul's Boutique is 1989.
Wow.
Wow.
Well, you
Anyway.
learn something new about Al Simmons' music taste every day. We finally discussed it. And there you have it.
Yep.
And if you ask us a question on any of our social media or email, we
We'll
will
remember it
respond
eventually.
within a matter of months.
Well, and it'll seem like even longer too because we record these ahead of time. So
Yeah,
like,
so it'll be 19 years by the time they're long stopped listening because they thought we didn't care.
It's a lot like Al's like 5-year gap.
That's
is
right.
kind of like the gap between when questions are asked
That's
of us
right.
and when we actually answer them. So
much like in real life, when a question is posed to me by anyone of authority, I have to stop and make sure I take my time to properly answer.
Cool. Well, I think we should get into these issues. They are pretty breezy compared to the first two, and we've said this a lot, and we're going to say it right now so that we don't repeat ourselves 1,000 times throughout the episode. Frequently, when there are these kind of long 4-issue arcs, first 2 issues are a lot of setup. Last 2 issues just kind of slam. I would not say that these slam, but they do move.
And there's some interesting stuff in here. There is some weird choices.
Breezed over. Weirdly.
Some really some stuff that's just like, okay, well, that's now in the mythos.
Yeah, exactly.
So before we get into it, Pierce, hit me with those credits.
Sweet. First, we're going to get into Spawn number 69.
Nice.
Todd McFarlane. Yeah, of course. Todd McFarlane and Image Comics presents. Actually, this issue is called Nice, which is weird. No, it's called Freaky.
Oh, okay. Well, even better.
It's called Freaky.
The year of the freak, baby.
Dedicated to Chris Carter, not the Minnesota Vikings wide receiver, I'm assuming.
No, probably the creator of X-Files. Since there were some X-Files Easter eggs in the last episode, we saw the screen and they were talking about it in kind of broad terms.
Yeah. Story by Todd McFarlane, pencils by Greg Capullo, inks by Todd McFarlane and Chance Wolfe, copy editor and lettering by Tom Orzechowski, colors by Brian Haberlin and Dan Kemp. And when we last saw our hero, I can read the little summary. Here's the Spawn number 68 summary. This is where we last left off. Sam and Twitch are called to the home of their client, Mrs. Bird, whose husband is murdered. As they drive away, puzzling over the scene of the crime, Cog mysteriously appears in the back seat of the 55 and asks them to help Spawn. Meanwhile, back in the alley, Spawn's murderer bags up the necroplasm as evidence of his death and takes it to his boss, the Freak. When the bums hear of their protector's demise, the battle over control of the alleys begins. So, in the last couple of issues, we saw 2 kind of factions of Night People. We saw the Night People that we know, and the Night People who had, to our understanding, been driven out by Spawn's appearance and his sort of just his existence had driven out the seedier parts of the Night People.
Yeah, he started like taking it out on them when he went like further into his Hellspawn mode back in the early 50s issues, about 8 or 10 issues ago, and he's kind of circled back around to being a little softer about it and letting his friendly Night People back in. But all that's changed because Spawn don't got no head. He's just strung up, much like the curse was in the alley at one point in the Freak's Den. In the Freak's Den, baby!
And so we're meeting up with Sam and Twitch. They're entering into Rat City. A search has begun, a search to find a being that most don't even believe exists. And it's really that Cog has let them know, hey, Spawn's chosen you. You're kind of part of this, no matter whether you want to be or not. So you've got to help him. That's what you have to do.
And if you want answers, you've got to get them from Spawn. And if you want them from Spawn, He's got to be alive.
Exactly. And as we've established through Curse of the Spawn, when we've seen Sam and Twitch without Spawn, there's a very innate sense of justice to Sam and Twitch. Sam especially, I think.
Right.
That really does drive them. And it does they're not just kind of blindly, they're not characters that are blindly doing something. They feel a pull towards this, that they must do it, not just for their client, Mrs. Bird, who pays most of their bills,
Right.
but also because they want to know the answers. They want to find the truth and they want justice.
I love this first page. Great art from Greg Capullo. The dirty boots tramping through the alley on the top panel, then the top-down view in the next with that kind of like diamond-shaped light. He's really good at using his lighting to kind of craft a shape on the page in a very Mike Mignola-esque way a lot of the time, actually. Case in point, this last panel, which is my favorite.
So good.
Of them looking super determined, Sam saying, okay, Twitch, let's do it. And Twitch saying, I've got your back, sir. And, you know, the thing that's funny about them is Sam's the big guy, Twitch is a small guy. But in a way, you're right. Sam is really the heart and the moral center of the pair, whereas Twitch is kind of more of the, like, actual factual brains and the trigger man.
Yeah.
As we'll see in this issue.
Twitch is a little scary. There's something potentially dangerous about him in a way that you don't necessarily expect, which I think is fun. I think it's just a fun way to play with the dynamic. I also like that we get a little bit of a break here from Sam and Twitch being goofy. We saw them be a little goofy in the last one. I always like the levity to some extent, but I like when they kind of lock in a little bit. I love this panel of Sam because he looks cool. And he is not a character that is often afforded the opportunity to
He's
look
not
cool.
like farting on a sandwich or like slipping on a fucking cake or something here.
Yeah.
These next two pages are great too. I really love the flow of both pages, especially when you look at them next to each other and the flow across both pages. It's very cinematic. The last panel on the right page, and I'm not going to skim over everything here, but the last panel on the right page of Twitch up front and Sam in the back, where Twitch's little beady pupils are visible behind his glasses.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I love that. But one thing that's going on here is we've returned to the era of lots of captions. All the captions that managed to make it out of the last two issues are present here right now. We're making up for lost time. And the captions are going deep into Rat City. Now, if you're a listener of this podcast, you know that Pierce and I have long puzzled over the nature of Rat City, the whereabouts and actual geographic location of Rat City. We get
A Bowery.
It is a Bowery in a Central Park. You get a lot of information here. Now, this is coming right after the movie, and the movie presents a version of Rat City that is very much like a neighborhood unto its own. That's like a weird, slummy,
kind of like Dino Hatton.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot like Dino Hatton. Or if you are a follower of the True Prophecies and you've seen Demolition Man, it's a lot like the Underground Society in Demolition Man, where it's just people who've been cast out by society making their way. Here, we get some information. It says, hunting down a creature known only to a few, they will traverse a labyrinth of decayed passages stretching deep into the bowels of Lower Manhattan. Okay, pins it down right there. Whether that makes any fucking sense with where it's been before doesn't matter. That's where it is now. Rat City, it's a place that exists only in the conflicted interests of a select clientele, police, bureaucrats, murderers, drug addicts, a place no one can defend or justify, a haven for anyone wanting to disappear from the face of the earth. The public as a whole knows nothing about the place. That's the way local politicians have kept it for the past 3 decades. For whatever fears the citizens may have about being assaulted by those they can't see, blah, 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 and so on and so on.
Yeah, pales in comparison to what they can't. And, you know, the further you penetrate its secluded darkness, the more horrific become the secrets it is trying to hide. Basically, the deeper and deeper you go, the more and more evil is stored there. This makes sense for whatever with everything that we've seen from Spawn as he is receded into this darkness, right? He's gotten the maggots and the rats and the bats and
the things that carry sin from the
Right.
darkness, and
and so we're getting more of that, which I think is interesting. I also think that we've kind of had a version of these captions like 6 times before. So
this is more concrete than we usually get, though, in talking about like what Rat City actually is. And okay, if you've ever seen The Wire, it sounds like it's kind of a bit of like a Hamsterdam, which I think is season 3 or 4. It's basically a place where the cops shuffle off, again, all the people who've been cast out by society, the people who have addiction issues, sex workers, street hustlers, things like that. They're all allowed to do their thing there as long as they don't take it outside of that neighborhood. And that's kind of a kettling sort of, it's a ghetto in a way of like kind of compressing and oppressing a certain type of people into a specific space. And here it's very much like where hell resides, except in one little place, which we're about to learn about. So leading up where we ended with, the secrets that Rat City's trying to hide, Twitch says, "Sweet mercy." Sam whistles and says, Jesus isn't here, but some of his friends are. We get this gnarly double page splash of Spawn strung up and crucified to the wall with his head lopped off, slime sloughing down his body. I just love slime and necroplasm. I'll say it. It's good. It's one of my favorite parts.
Looks cool. And I like this double page spread quite a bit too.
Yes, it's a great spread. Again, more definitively viewing this through Sam and Twitch's eyes.
I think that that's really helpful because the reason that we miss them frequently is because they are POV characters more than any other character. There are other regular humans, but they don't engage with Spawn in the same way. Or Spawn doesn't engage with other characters in the same way, right? He has no connection to Sam and Twitch, except that he has this sort of unspoken connection to Sam and Twitch. So they are sort of understanding everything the way that we're understanding. And we cut away from them sort of looking at Spawn's body to see Bootsy by himself without Bobby being confronted by Cagliostro.
Because Bootsy stayed behind when the fight started. He said, "This isn't my fight. I can't go." Before we get into that, I just want to say one thing in response to what you're saying about Sam and Twitch, which is I think that Todd is maybe learning a little bit about how to use them as the POV characters from Curse of the Spawn and from the Spawn animated series in particular. Like, I think he's taking a lot of that kind of pacing and like fronting of them as characters for the audience, and it's working. It's kind of helping him grow as a writer, I think, to have other people playing in the spawning grounds, as they will say.
I think that is something that we're going to see carry through to today, in the sense that the way that he keeps talking about the next movie is that it is from their perspective specifically, and that Spawn is almost a secondary character, that your main characters are Sam and Twitch investigating this thing, and that leads them to Spawn. But Spawn, it's not going to be like the first movie where everything, or even the first, say 12 issues of this comic, where everything, really most issues of this comic, but first 12 issues specifically, where it is one guy coming back to life and asking a lot of questions. Instead, it's cops understanding that a lot of weird shit is happening and kind of going to investigate. So I think it's cool. I think you're right. I think it is making him better.
Yeah. So Cog and Bootsy have a little confrontation here, which is interesting, where Cog basically is like, "Listen, quote unquote, Bootsy, I know who you really are. You're an agent of heaven sent to Earth to watch over Spawn and monitor this situation." And Bootsy's like, to watch but not interfere. And he says, "That's exactly right. But unlike hell, heaven believes in discretion." There's something interesting about this conversation, which is that it kind of implies that Cagliostro is there specifically on behalf of hell. But later, Bootsy also says, "You're trying to steer him away from his predetermined fate. Heaven is more interested in people who haven't made their bed and are lying in it haven't had their fate already sealed once by being sent to hell.
Do you find that actually comes into complete conflict with what we've learned about God to this point, where God kind of like, well, I don't know that she likes Spawn, but she kind of does, and she's like, oh, he's the one. He's like, what Bootsy's saying doesn't really make sense, doesn't really like line up with that. And I wonder if it's just that Bootsy's pretty low on the totem pole and he doesn't actually know. And that his job is, hey, your job's to watch, your job's to be here. I like what he says about our involvement must be through intervention that can be that they can attribute to unseen forces. They call them miracles. Like, I like that he's like angels in the outfield, kind of.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Curse of the Spawn issues with the hunter sent to hell to kill Malbolgia, where it kind of works the same way. He is asked to operate under discretion and at the discretion of the divine will without questioning it. And I think that's where Bootsy really is with it. He has an understanding of the divine paradigm and he doesn't question it. He is here not to interfere, but to watch what's going on. And therefore, I think we've seen different denizens of heaven and different aspects of heaven have different attitudes towards Spawn, even across different types of angels. Even, different individual angels have had different reactions to how their version of faith in its very direct hierarchy in their lives seems to interact with Spawn. So I guess what I think you're right. It's kind of just Bootsy is not really high enough on the pay grade to be questioning that kind of stuff. He just has his belief in the rigid understanding, and he's not trying to do anything with Spawn. He's not talking to him or trying to guide him to do anything like Cagliostro is. So I think that's kind of, where we're at.
Yeah.
I do. It does make me wonder if Bootsy has some other history. They say he's an angel, but it makes me wonder if there's more to him, much like Cog was supposedly a hellspawn. Maybe we'll find out more about that.
Maybe something of a fallen angel, seeing as how he doesn't have to this. If he's an angel, to this point, we've only seen women that are angels.
We did see that one hunter in that issue.
Oh, that's true. I forgot about Abdiel. Yeah,
we've now seen male angels at this point. It's the line's kind of been blurred, which fine, whatever. I think it's fine to blur that line, but they do seem to serve different. They do seem to serve different functions. The men we've seen have much less agency than the women in heaven.
That's true.
So it's still a matriarchal kind of system. I like how Cog ends the conversation. Bootsy says, we've done our share of miracles. What has your side done to stop evil from running rampant? And Cog says, I didn't know heaven was keeping score or that it can so easily justify its actions with a logic that suits only itself. I'm sorry. I was hoping I could count on it being more than that. Good night. Which I think reflects the journey of faith that a lot of people who start out believing in God and wind up not believing, or at least not believing in an organized, version of the church or organized religion around Christianity. You want more than what it actually offers in terms of justification for the answers that it gives you.
I think it lines up too with what Todd has said about these things in the Spawning Ground as well, where he's like, I'm not a fan of religion necessarily, but I do have this belief in good and evil, and I think that that's kind of coming through and that part is remaining consistent, even if some of the details here don't necessarily make sense, and I think that's
it does still also
They're
kind of
questions,
reflect.
Right?
That's right, questions, but it also does kind of reflect the Cog and Bootsy of it all. Does reflect the heaven and hell of it all as well, in that Cog is asking these questions. He's asking, what more is there, though? What is heaven doing?
I think too that Cog's name is also it speaks to exactly what he is, right? Yeah. He's a cog within this machine, and Bootsy is much the same, and so is Spawn on some level, right? Yep. So are Sam and Twitch, right? They're all cogs in this giant kind of machine of heaven and hell, and so we'll find out.
Yeah.
Um,
Great cartooning by Greg Capullo on both of these pages of their conversation, by the way, and some nice lettering from Orzechowski on that first page. What we
I'll
get
say across
into
the issue.
oh, go ahead.
I was going to say across the issue, really solid cartooning because there's a lot of emotions and a lot of like physical exertion across these issues that are not they're not necessarily super heroic traditionally, right? It's a lot of regular people trying to do stuff. And as you're about to say, we're about to get into Sam and Twitch removing Spawn's headless body from the wall and them having to face the fact that his necroflesh body weighs over 400 pounds.
As we've often been reminded.
Yeah.
One thing to note on this page, this first page of that sequence, Twitch with his glasses off.
Yeah. He's got weird eyes.
On the second panel there. Yeah. Well, he wears glasses, corrective lenses, but he just looks funny in that panel. He looks very Donald Sutherland.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. But they
more
pull him
with
off
the
the
glasses
wall.
off. Yeah, they pull him down.
They pull him down. Sam, they try to use his chains to sort of leverage him off the wall. It seems it doesn't work. Spawn's body falls on top of Twitch. We do like a little kind of
400 pounds of necroplasm. That's got a height.
Yeah.
It is very Abbott and Costello.
100%. And but they start moving Spawn's body, and they run into Bobby, who is upset that they're moving the body, and they're like, "Listen, you don't want to fight us," and they pull their guns. Just as they do, the other kind of faction of night people who are working for the Freak show up on the alley, and so Sam and Twitch are kind of at a crossroads where these sort of warring factions of night people are about to sort of battle it out, and they're stuck in the middle of it, and they've kind of just moved Spawn's body.
It brings us in many ways back to Spawn number 25, where the first big climax of the series was, where it was the same kind of thing with all the different agencies convening in Rat City looking for Spawn in his alley. Now we're seeing the consequences of what happens when Spawn's not in the alley. And yeah, Sam and Twitch looking very determined, drawing their guns. And the two sides are basically like, you don't want no part of this shit. Spawn's body's still laying there. We can see that he's kind of laying across this border. When you look down at the bottom panel of the second page of this sequence, where Sam and Twitch, where it's an overhead view, you can see that they've now dragged him into this corner of the alley. That'll be important in a minute. Spawn's position will be important in a minute, because there's a part of the alley where his powers don't work, which is why he was able to be killed in the first place with his head blown off, and the creatures of darkness haven't been able to bring more necroplasm to reassemble him. Just as they're about to start butting heads, the two sides of the warring factions of the night people, Twitch is like, don't move. And there's this poster in between them that says vote Nixon, which that's got to be, even now at this point, a 20-year-old poster. 20, more
easily.
than 20.
Yeah, easily. But I think that speaks to the fact that like Rat City is never touched at this point, right?
Yeah,
it's been left to its own devices for such a long time. It's been a long time since it was a normal place where normal people were, that were inherently good, like Richard Nixon.
Yeah, exactly. Our nation's greatest president.
I don't know if you heard, but he was not a crook. So
no, he did assure us of that, famously so. And as we all know, we should take presidents at their words.
Right.
So Twitch fires off a round to get them to stop confronting each other, goes right between the two gangs, and both sides are like, you missed, jerk. And then Sam is like, or Twitch says, before we get into any of that, I suggest you all look behind you. He's put a shot directly between the eyes of Tricky Dick Nixon. And that is a tricky dick nose Dick Nixon.
That nose is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's recalculus, it's redongulus, it's rewienerulus. That's repenisulus. That nose is clearly very phallic.
Yeah.
And the other part of his face looks like my parents having an argument.
Did you notice Did you notice the Subhumans logo on the top of that page?
Oh yeah, so there is. Yeah, that's
Oh.
true.
That's something.
There you go. So Mickey
Anyway,
Mouse is dead.
he nails Dick Nixon right in the right between the eyes, and as a threat, the next one of you to move the muscle gets a repeat performance, which is fun. Oh, and then we're going to get into exactly what we did at the top of the episode, where some of the Night People, Sam and Twitch get the Night People up against the wall with their hands up, and they're kind of jawing at them, and then who appears but
The Freak! He shows up behind Twitch's back with a knife to his jugular, and he's basically just like, drop your gun or else you'll have two headless bodies to deal with. There's a big standoff. Freak is just cackling.
And Sam's going to kind of try to call his bluff and says, like, I don't care about him. Kill him. I don't care. Freak just kind of
I never did like the little twerp. Show me you got a death wish. You hear me, loser? And it's him basically, calling his bluff. And finally, Sam drops his gun. But as this has all been going on, Spawn has secretly been rebuilding himself because he's now back in a part of the alley where his powers work. And you can see that the worms of the dirt that carry the sin of the night are making their way finally to where his headless body is to rebuild him. There are flies honing in. And as they're all eyes are on the Freak and Twitch, Spawn suddenly springs up with his head back. This is a sick looking page. They call him Hell's newest Grim Reaper. And that seems to be an official title that we'll get into. When it said that, I was a little confused by this art because I thought for a second that the knife was like a scythe that Spawn was holding, like a Grim Reaper. But
that would have been cool.
Freak's,
but it's Freak's knife, yeah.
That's the Freak knife, baby.
Cool page. And so Dead Zones, let's talk about Dead Zones for a minute. Dead Zones are something that's going to come up quite a bit in Spawn moving forward now. The idea that just some places are too good and hell has no agency there. I guess there is I guess I would imagine that there's a similar thing for beings of heaven, but we've not really seen it the same way. Although you could argue that the reason that Angela wasn't able to kill Spawn is maybe because of that, right? It's kind of an opposite, right? And Rat City is so evil. The Dead Zones are back even till today. So we got about 25 years of this incoming. I don't know. I think it's an interesting idea. I think unfortunately, much like Rat City, it being this, well, I don't know. It's a dead zone here. Okay, well, what, 5 feet away? It's not a dead zone. Exactly. Is kind of it's convenient.
Yeah. And Spawn will go in and out of the dead zone in the next issue, which is Spawn number 70, and the credits to it are.
Before we get into the credits,
okay.
It's this cover,
that
which
cover.
is a very iconic cover to Spawn number 70.
Listeners, it's pitch black. It's got Spawn's gritted teeth on it and his green glowing eyes pouring out energy, and it's just the teeth and eyes against that solid black background. You can probably picture it because you've certainly seen it. It's a kick-ass image.
It's also the back cover of at least the first compendium, I believe.
Yeah, you're right. It is. It's not the cover of the second one, but it is the first.
Yeah. Anyway, Spawn number 70. Wow, 70. That's crazy. We are 1/5 of the way through Spawn. Crazy.
How about that?
Todd McFarlane image.
Only 5 more years.
5 more years. 5 more years. Todd McFarlane and Image Comics presents Darkness, dedicated to the memory of Archie Goodwin. This would have been right around the time Archie Goodwin passed. He passed in March of 1998. Story by Todd McFarlane, pencils.
One of the greatest Marvel Comics editors of all time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Story by Todd McFarlane, pencils by Greg Capullo, inks by Todd McFarlane and Danny Meeke. Copy editor and lettering by Tom Orzechowski. Colors by Brian Haberlin and Dan Kemp. And we get a somewhat classic first page with a lot of goddamn text. Not exactly a splash. I think that Greg has a little bit more fun kind of reminding us who all the players are. If you somehow missed issue 69, you get caught up pretty quickly, I think. So we see a guy that is not Jason.
Panel, I thought it was. Yeah, I was going to say I thought it was Jason Wynn when I first looked.
Yeah, it definitely looks a lot like him. It just isn't, because he's like a little too deranged looking and a little too like rough and tumble to be Jason Wynn.
It's like Tony, or his name was something like that.
Yeah, but yeah, we get him. Then we get Bobby. We get Sam. We get Twitch and Freak, and then we're gonna get to one of the all-time great double-page splashes, maybe in the history of Spawn. On the next page, because the narration is kind of catching us up on who everybody is, what they're up to, everything we talked about in the last issue, and it kind of ends with, but the simple fact of his return, of his new life, created a ripple which has touched many. Some of this effect was a result of his own actions, as with the day he left a corpse in the office of two detectives, see Spawn number 5. With others, it's because they'd already crossed the line past which most of us would dare not go, into the bosom of madness, where insanity is sought out, embraced. This reality, these people, now define Spawn's world. And then we turn the page and we see, hell yeah.
It's so good. It is a double page spread close up of Spawn's face going across both pages, mouth full of worms, dripping saliva between his teeth. This is full on, fully evolved maggot face Spawn, to the point where he's got bugs and maggots fully crawling in and out of his flesh. The inking is off the charts. It's so good. It looks so dope. This is a hellish, terrifying Spawn, and I love it. I love when they get the horror in there. I love on the right side, you can see the little flies buzzing around. There's a lot of Jack Davis in this. Jack Davis, of course, one of the great artists for the original Tales of the Crypt and EC Comics. And you can see just a lot of that like putrid, necrotized flesh here. And it's so sick. Like, this is a poster I would absolutely hang on my wall. Like, one of the best pictures of Spawn ever.
Totally. I love the coloring too. It's pretty subtle, and the blues and greens really pop against the really, really deep blacks. The little splashes of red of the cape, the light on one side of his face into the sort of blue darkness on the other side. It just works really, really, really well.
It does. And that mottled kind of bruised, decayed color background is really good. Yeah. Really good all around. Excellent work from all parties involved. So Spawn is now wrapped up like Dracula with his cape. It's tightly wrapped around him, and it says sin, wickedness, evil. He takes it from their combined auras and combines it within his own. His cloak drawn tightly to him, then somehow he gives it form. So what he's doing now is absorbing the darkness of their auras and letting it back out at them in physical form as a swarm of bats. And suddenly his cape, which has been wrapped around him, flies open and all these bats just pour out. And he basically says that he's giving himself over to the role of Spawn. Oh, on the previous page, this is what's interesting. It says, the curse that is Spawn has been called many things through the centuries. Tangible form enshrouds this name we now fear most, the Grim Reaper. It is far from being a myth. And though he's tried to fight what he is, he will now resist it no longer. So for about the third or fourth time, we're being told that Spawn is now the agent of hell, and he won't be resisting that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one thing I don't really love about these two issues. I mean, I guess these 4 issues, but these 2 specifically, Spawn doesn't even really have a line of dialogue until late in the issue. Now, I realize he didn't have a head for most of the last one, so like I'll give Todd a break there. But Spawn becomes despite doing a lot of stuff, he does feel pretty passive because there's captions instead of dialogue here. Now, granted, Spawn doesn't know a lot of this stuff that's in the captions, so I understand that. The captions are doing that job, or otherwise you'd have to have like Cog nearby to like say it. And I would argue that maybe the captions kind of are Cog because they are in that brown that he's usually wearing. So you could sort of.
It's sort of that all-purpose
Yes.
narrator that could someday be revealed as a voice.
Yeah.
And it kind of feels a lot like what you were saying earlier about Spawn being an object in the story more than like a character. It kind of works sometimes. Here it kind of works because they're fighting over him.
Yeah.
And he's sudden. I love the horror movie like cape wrapped around him and then it just blasts open with all the bats flying out. The panel of the bats blasting out of him with like the light pouring from behind him.
Really cool.
That panel has to be one of the reasons that Greg Capullo drew so much Batman.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like just straight up.
Yeah. We've said that kind of time and time again that this is the perfect sort of tryout for Batman, which makes sense considering Todd was on Batman at one point too. And his Batman similarly has those like hooked shoulders and, as the bats escape, Sam is going to use the opportunity to flick a can from the ground that has the top is open and razor sharp.
Twitch is doing that.
Twitch is doing that. Twitch still in the grasp of the Freak is going to flip it up and he's going to slice Freak's hand so that he drops his knife. Then Sam is going to come and tackle him and they're going to fight.
As they're fighting, Twitch runs up behind and pistol whips the Freak. Pistol whip the Freak sounds like a dance move. I'm gonna go down and pistol whip the Freak.
and then Freak runs away.
Yeah, he scampers off. Listeners, I just want to say I'm so delighted by the Freak so often. Partially because I live outside of Atlanta and I grew up just outside of Atlanta. Which is, of course, Freaknik country. And every time they talk about the Freak, I just imagine a good old classic Freaknik party. There's a great documentary about Freaknik on, I can't remember what service, but it's really interesting and really groundbreaking to know. So
cool. We get another great panel with the bats and Sam and Twitch that I really like. I really love Twitch here with the shadows kind of coming from under his face. Mm-hmm. Sam looking over his shoulder, the bats in the background, as then we see what's been really unleashed by Spawn unleashing the evil back out into the alley. The Night People factions are just full on brawling.
Yeah.
And Sam and Twitch are just trying to keep it together.
This panel down here looks a lot like the cover of Capullo's Batman #1 with the fracas.
Oh yeah.
The full on melee going on. And yeah, it kind of what's happening here, and this will come up again at the end of the issue, is that Spawn has kind of gotten a new power that's almost like, in a way, it's almost like the Penance Stare by Ghost Rider or something, where he absorbs the quote-unquote aura of the sins and the darkness that's in people and then unleashes it as like the creatures of the night that take the living shape of sin.
It's kind of like Raven from Teen Titans too, right? Isn't she able to like draw from the emotions of like people near her?
I think you're exactly right that she does some such of a thing like that.
A big bird come from her soul tummy.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So they're just
I don't know how else to explain that.
fully brutally beating you. Well, that's why I just said okay, because you succinctly summed it up. They're just brutally smashing each other. This guy's getting curb stomped, like his teeth are getting shattered out. This guy's getting bashed in the face. There are guns going off and people are getting shot. It says both sides suffer losses. This is just a brutal melee.
People are
There's
dying.
Blood and bats. People are getting killed, and we'll learn more about that in a minute. There's a guy getting bashed with some knuckle dusters here, and down at the bottom of the final page of this sequence is Spawn just maniacally like blasting, still just wordlessly blasting forth this cloud of bats, which I actually think kind of is badass. It's extremely menacing.
Super cool.
It's back
Also,
in
I love
that
the little
realm of
bat
Spawn
eyes.
as like, yes, all the little bat eyes all over him. His skulls on his cape now have glowing eyes as well. I like
gone
it. Just
full Party
it's
City.
that vein of, yeah, hell yeah. It's that vein of Spawn as like a horror movie villain that I actually really like. We get another sequence here where Wanda and Cyan are riding in the car. Cyan is irresponsibly waving her necklace that's made of Spawn's grungy old shoelace and her pacifier out the window of the car as they're driving. She gets distracted by her mom telling her to sit straight in her car seat and loses the grip on the necklace, and it goes flying out the window of the car. Cyan pitches such a fit that Wanda has to stop the car suddenly, almost gets in a wreck. Cyan blasts out of the car and runs into the median where she finds the pacifier. It says the small girl covers the 40 yards in seconds. Miraculously, the soother and necklace had landed in the shoulder lane too, because in her state, Cyan would surely have run into the path of oncoming traffic if that's where her toy had landed. Not honestly, I pointed out that little bit because I kind of think that's one of the worst written bits in the of prose in the whole issue. For some reason, it just really sticks in my mind as like
It's just like a weird. I don't know. It didn't have to be this. This is a lot of business over 3 pages that probably could have been done in one, and also maybe not in a highway. And also, they're not.
yeah,
really,
I don't know.
as a reader, you kind of know they're not really in danger. Like she's not really gonna die. So are you trying to add stakes here?
Well, what they're showing is a second, and they call back to this again in the notes and in Wanda taking note of what's going on. It's a flashback to the last time she lost her pacifier, where she just freaked out and all the trauma returned. And it's like the necklace, the pacifier is basically like a plug, literally holding in all that trauma.
It's almost like the pacifier is something of a pacifier.
Yeah, it's interesting how it pacifies her in that way.
That's a really heavy metaphor there, Todd.
Yeah,
I
For
do.
what?
I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah.
I really do love the panel of Cyan grabbing Wanda's face. She looks insane, but it's really funny and really, really well cartooned. Like, it's just really
Like a
well
missing
rendered. She
tooth.
looks completely crazy, and I love it.
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
like he's. I think Capullo's getting comfortable figuring out what like a kid looks like as opposed to an adult, and it's just her eyes look crazy. It's very like Looney Tunes, but like in a perfect way.
So we cut back from there. It says that was earlier in the day, and we just needed to know that right now. We cut right back to where we were before that, with this poor guy getting bashed in the grill with a pipe. The cops are on their way, and they're trying to go in, but there's something going on where when they walk into the alley, they find themselves always returning to the entrance. Some force is spookily keeping them out. The experience of futility of the exact same results, it says. They finally make their way in, or no, they don't. They just say, you better call for backup. As that's happening, there's just piles of bodies piling up and mountains of like body parts and blood, and this melee is getting so insane. And then suddenly Bobby gets shanked in the back, and as he's laying there, Bootsy drags him into the alleyway, and he says, you're going to be okay, Bobby, just hang in there. Bootsy curses his feelings and the fact he's been on Earth with them for so long. He feels betrayed by his emotions, while Spawn has completely given way to his own. And it explains that Bootsy is now aware. He's here to record what goes on in this particular place. He knows his orders as well as the possible and now likely cost of disobedience, because he's intervening to save his friend Bobby's life, which I like that they get to make up. It's the whole thing with Bootsy is weird. Let's pause right here and just talk about how it's weird that Bootsy is touched by an angel.
It is obvious that there needed to be another character that represented heaven that wasn't Angela and it wasn't God and wasn't those angels. And this kind of gives to this point, though, it's not like we've gotten hints that like Bootsy's like a little bit magic or something. He's just been like
Right.
he's just been one of the guys, you know. Also, Cog's not like let on that he kind of knows that either.
No.
So
And I mean, secrets come out slow and syrupy in Spawn sometimes like that.
yeah, but it does feel like the Touch My Angel thing's funny because it does feel very much like that show. My mom used to love that show.
That makes all the sense in the world based on everything I know about you and your family. I love this panel of Bootsy at the bottom, though. He's very Harry Dean Stanton in that panel.
100%.
Love that guy. Spawn's just freaking out. His mouth is pouring out worms. His cape is flaring around. He's stalking his way through the alleys when suddenly it all just stops in his tracks. And he realizes that he crossed over a line, and this is where we find out about dead zones. And he walks back into the hell zone where his powers work again. Every image that Greg Capullo draws of Spawn's cape flaring out just kind of rules. Yeah. This one here, also great.
This really points out how good, and we've said this before, but like how good Spawn's costume is. Because you put him in silhouette, you put the M in white, and the cape huge, and you know the chains in silhouette as well. It can't be anybody else, you know.
Yeah,
it cannot be any other. There's no other superhero could be, and that's awesome. And it just makes for really dynamic panels.
Absolutely, I love this panel of his scully, like his very skullish face on the next page, where his head is still kind of like regrowing. Where Sam and Twitch are trying to get in to stop the fight, but there's like a force keeping them out. It says like a wind, a mystical gale force wind. And they say, you have to do something, Spawn. He says, I can't go in either. What's going on in there has to happen. I'm not in the mood to die for anyone tonight. And he says, I know where the problem started and I mean to fix that. And he runs off to find the freak.
I like that he melds with the shadows, like he's Nightcrawler or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we get another great page.
Yes. Of him standing over the freak's hair. The freak, the design is very much like a Filthy Freak Brother kind of thing. Like he is a freak in the like 60s freak out kind of standards.
Yeah,
his
100%.
hair is all wild. He's got these huge, cracked, craggy nails. I just love the way that Greg Capullo leans into the griminess and the grittiness of like the weird creatures of the Spawn.
It's got
world.
like claws practically.
This panel, okay, so Spawn is like, I saw you flee. What's the matter? What you've caused wasn't crazy enough for you. There weren't enough body parts or blood or screams or insanity. And the freakish is like, he says, so you're alive again. It won't matter, though. What you've witnessed tonight will just repeat itself until these alleys are rid of you. And you can't tell if he's talking about, like, a force of will that's coming through the alleys trying to rid itself of Spawn, or if it's just that the cycle of Spawn's involvement in these people's lives is going to keep repeating in this way until it's over.
It's also the thing that I don't understand, right, is if that gale force wind, like, is that what Bootsy's saying is what he finds out is the result of his disobedience? He got involved, so now the night people...
No.
But if Spawn can't go where the gale force wind is, then like I know that's where the dead zone is.
I think that's just a matter of like this is now happening, and I'm not exactly sure about that.
It's very odd.
I think that Spawn could go in there, but his powers would stop.
But that's what I mean. And so that says to me then, is that like a heaven?
I'm not exactly sure. To me, what Bootsy is afraid of is that he's going to lose his divinity or become a fallen angel. The price of choosing his own will is that that's all he has now. But you may be right. I love the panel of, I love this whole page of Spawn confronting the freak, and it's like a close-up on Spawn's eye, and you can see the freak's reflection in it. The spiders crawling down over Freak's face, And he says, Freak says, you can't change any of it, so don't try and intimidate me. You don't scare me. And he says, don't I? Well, then do you scare yourself? Do you know what you are? What hides inside you? And here is where it's spelled out that basically what happens is, this is so freaky. I didn't,
cool.
no pun intended. Spawn is like, that's it. Try laughing it away. Show me how unafraid you are. Let us feel it. Come on. Don't you want to feel? And it's like all the insects that are formed of the aura of Freak's sins are pouring out of his own skin and engulfing him and devouring him. And it says, and now the Freak is literally killing himself. And that's where it ends. And it's this big panel of Spawn's cape just spread out. Freak falling over. This page right here is very like 80s Marvel. There's some like very Mignola Sienkiewicz kind of like some of that Triumph and Torment Doctor Strange era, maybe some like JR Jr. Just with the way the silhouette and the cape are played off each other, it just looks great. And that's where we end, with the Freak being devoured and ripped apart by the beasts that are manifested by the darkness of his own sins.
Yeah, pretty sick. And pretty satisfying, I'd say. For Spawn to have not been a character for a lot of these 2 issues, he just kind of gets dragged around, wakes up, yells a little bit, but then does this. And also because, like, I know we've lamented villains before in Spawn, but, like, Freak is cool, but I hate him.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm not sad to see him get devoured by his own evil. That's cool.
Yeah, why
do
not?
that more. Do that to Jason Wynn, Spawn.
That's the thing that I'm hoping that's the thing that reading this, especially the second time right now, really triggered in me, is that I hope we do see more of that, because it's actually really reminds me of the Spectre.
Oh, yeah.
More than Ghost Rider, reminds me more of the Spectre as the divine agent of retribution, where like there's that whole era of the Spectre where his divine retribution is like brutally ironic Twilight Zone type shit. And it's like scary as fuck. Give me that. If that's what Spawn being the Grim Reaper means, hell yeah. I want to see Spawn just show up and be like, here's the manifestation of your sins, and it's some fucking nightmare thing. Give him that little bit of give him a Freddy Krueger era. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Give him a Pinhead era where he is the monster, where he shows up and enacts this powerful will on the beings around him. Partially, I think it would be cool to see Spawn have that agency for a while, even if it is a kind of animalistic, instinctual type of thing. But also, I just think Spawn rips so hard and sings when it leans into not so much the like mythic, ooky, like deep lore, but the like hellish terror and horror of it all. That's the part that I think really sings. And Todd McFarlane sometimes really has a great knack for that stuff.
I think when Spawn is really seeking out the evil that lies in the hearts of men, or exposing it, I think that's good. And I think that, like you said, the book sings a little bit more. I think it took us a little while to get here because we had to have him like, we had all those like interstitials where it's like darkness and sin and the things and the this and the that. And I don't know, couldn't you just show us like having him have him suck the aura out of somebody and then we'll get it? Because this is way cooler.
Well, something just totally occurred to me about that like that's Spawn fulfilling his purpose as a creature, as a creation of hell, as a hellspawn, but also kind of as a character as he's designed. A lot of Spawn is trying to make a character work totally against his own creation. Like a lot of Spawn is if like Spider-Man was going around going like, gosh, boy, I really wish I could wall crawl, but I better not swing on any webs and I better not stick to anything. It's like if you had Superman going around trying not to use his powers, but still take action. And it just really is, what really is interesting about that is that what we're saying is the title works when Spawn is not fighting against its own nature as both a character and a being and a title. And I think it's interesting to see that evolution of Todd McFarlane kind of constantly rowing the boat back around to that point and realizing over and over again, I guess Spawn has to do Spawn stuff. I can't have him be like, I better not do any Spawn stuff for 18 months in a row.
Yeah. It's funny I'm now that you're kind of saying it the way that you're saying it, JMS's the other storyline in Spider-Man is him doing Spawn as in a Spider-Man comic, kind of.
Yeah,
kind
of.
In the sense that that's about these like two pieces of Peter Parker, the spider and the man, and that he does not embrace the spider enough because he's always trying to be the man. And also Spider-Man's thing frequently is like, I can't be Spider-Man anymore. I just got to be Peter Parker. So
since Amazing Spider-Man number 50, Spider-Man No More.
Yeah. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's interesting how that's kind of, it's just interesting to me how it's just now occurring to me that really the entire story of Spawn is Todd McFarlane trying to write anything but the character that Spawn is. And I think that's...
Do you think though that that's because, to bring it back to the Spider-Man of it all, is to not write Spider-Man again? Is to like to sort of be like, well, I want to write a character who's different, and I want to write a character who is actively rejecting the call, right? Actively rejecting the call. The problem is that like, I think he's unfortunately like written himself into corners where like, he's like, well, the character can't actively reject the call forever because then we never get to the next part of the story. Right. What's interesting is that like, he could have done this during Spawn Across America, right? He could have had like the Frank kid's dad have spiders eat him or whatever. And that would have been much more effective than what he did.
Well, we're in an era of Spawn now that's much more horror focused, for one thing.
Yeah.
And I want to make it clear, when I lay it out like that, it kind of sounds like I'm saying like, Todd McFarlane created Spawn. Does he not know his powers? Is he stupid? And it's not like that. I think it's a very intentional, like you're saying, a very intentional style of storytelling to say like, okay, what if he is trying not to be what he is instead of most superheroes? Not many superheroes, the most common superheroes, Spider-Man, Superman. Spider-Man is a great comparison for Spawn, and it's not because of the Todd McFarlane of it all. It's because Spider-Man is a guy who hates his destiny in some ways, but he has to fully embrace it.
Mm-hmm.
He realizes that he has no choice but to become the hero he's meant to be. Spawn is kind of, like you said, the opposite of that, a guy trying to figure out what he's meant to be and realizing that the destiny he's been handed doesn't match the one that he wants. I think it's a very intentional storytelling choice.
Yeah.
But like you said, I think it's also the thing that keeps us kind of spinning wheels sometimes, when what often then happens is, and then Spawn embraces himself and it saves the day. And it also makes for a kick-ass story because also it's been built up for a lot of issues over and over, how powerful and intense a warrior Spawn can be and all this stuff, how powerful he'll be when he finally gets it all together. And so to see some of that coming together is dope. And again, it's also just a cool horror movie moment of like the weird undead zombie monster wrapped up in its cloak. And then suddenly it springs open and it's pouring forth all these fucking like night monsters or whatever. It's awesome.
Yeah. I think that on some level, the spinning its wheels that Spawn tends to go through is a little bit of Todd learning to write. Kind of, he's like learning to write as we're going. It is the active decision to make a superhero comic that is different from the superhero comics on the stands. Unfortunately, I think that there's a reason that tropes are tropes, and there's a reason that there's a certain kind of pattern to the way that these stories go, and that like Spawn's not reinventing the wheel in a lot of ways. I think artistically, like you could make the argument that yes, it does, because I think it informs the next, especially for characters like Batman and Spider-Man. I see a lot of Todd's Spawn specifically, and his Spider-Man, but his Spawn in like JRJR's Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Which would be, I guess we're coming up on that in this era, right? Where we're coming up on
Well,
that.
he had done Spider-Man off and on.
No,
throughout the
but
80s.
I mean that JMS run where we
Oh,
get
JMS, yes.
that JMS JR run where it's
Yes,
really
yes.
like kind of dialed into this sort of
It's like
darker
99, 2000, 2001.
it's
somewhere in
about
there.
it's almost like this is 90. We're in 98 now, which is crazy.
It's a couple years away.
Yeah,
But
and
it is. It is crazy that we've also gone through like 6 years of Spawn at this point.
Yeah. It feels like we're flying through it, and then at the same time, I just said, "Oh, we got through it. We've gotten through a fifth of Spawn, and then Spawn is 30 years old." So yeah, we got through a fifth of Spawn, which is, I don't know, it's kind of crazy how math works.
A fifth of Spawn. All right.
But yeah, no, I like to see Spawn just be a little bit more of a traditional superhero book every once in a while. I like that that Todd's reminded like, oh, but when I did Spider-Man, I did like a little bit more of a horror bent on Spider-Man, and that was really cool. And I think you can have your cake and eat it too a little bit. You don't need to actively reject tropes. I remember like the first scripts I ever wrote, not that I've ever published anything, but the first scripts that I wrote, I would specifically not do things because I was like, I can't do that because that's what everybody expects. Sometimes what everybody expects is the way to sort of bring things home, like to stick the landing. You need, especially now that we're in this era of like cinema sins and like plot holes and this, right? Sometimes you just got to land the plane, and when you do, it's this like incredible like relief as an audience to get that moment,
Well, I think storytelling and comic storytelling, as with anything else, there is often a relief and a hominess in returning to the fundamentals, just whatever those may be, the fundamentals of filmmaking, of comics, of superhero comics, the fundamentals of art, whatever your passion is, there is a fundamental, elemental, formative aspect of that can be comforting to return to, even if your ultimate goal is to break all the rules of it.
Yeah.
I think that's why there's the trope of you got to know the rules to break them.
The thing that I just had this thought, but and I don't have a strong thesis about it. So if this sounds stupid, just let me know. But Smallville is kind of like the early issues of Spawn, where it's like, we're going to do a superhero book. Okay. Or we're going to do a superhero show. Okay. He can't ever really be the superhero, though. We have to dance around it as much as possible. And trying to watch Smallville now is crazy because you're like, no, this is just a show about kids in high school. This is not about Superman.
Yeah.
And, we get like the final episode 9 years later or whatever it is, where he like finally has the suit for 5 seconds.
And in that 9 years, though, they spend so much time riding around their ass to get to their elbow because they have to do everything they would do if it was a Superman show without just making it a fucking Superman show.
Yeah, and that's what Spawn is sometimes. So when Spawn is just capital S Spawn, the superhero, even if he is the more horror tinged version of that, I think we have a lot of fun with it. And I didn't love these 4 issues. I think Spawn's a little too passive. I like the stuff at the end. I think it's cool. Love to see Freak again. Love to see Sam and Twitch, get some time to shine. As we're recording this, we just released the Suture episode of, and boy, oh boy, having to revisit that in editing, I was just like, this is rough. And listeners, I understand if you skip that episode, but yeah. Do you want to get into the back matter? Do you have any other thoughts you want to share?
No, I mean, I guess if we want to do final thoughts or save that for after the back matter.
Save that for after the back matter, I think.
Sounds good.
So in Spawn number 69,
nice.
Somebody asks what a hardcover trade is and if they're real or whatever. And we're getting into an era of like there being a lot more collectors and stuff that are that are sort of snapping up the toys, snapping up the issues. So then we also get fans who are, hold collectors in great disdain, which is kind of funny. And basically, Todd's just like, that's the first 12 issues of Spawn. We put them out as a hardcover for a book fair. And yeah, it's better than giving people singles. So cool. I guess that's cool. This one's kind of funny. Dear Todd, I thought I'd send you this article so you can see how accurate French articles about Spawn are. I'd also like to address some issues concerning your comic. First of all, I understand you're an atheist or agnostic. So why did you have to feature a creature called God in your comic? You don't show
a creature
him
called God.
Yeah, you don't show him.
My favorite sitcom.
You don't show him/her often, but God keeps referring to him/her. I mean, people can believe in whatever they want, but us infidels keep being fed with religious speeches. You named the bad dude Malbolgia. You could have found the same kind of name for the good dude. Don't you feel some people could call it proselytism or subliminal stuff? In the second place, I do like Spawn, but I feel like the basic original plot is either tailing off or kind of dragging on. I mean, Spawn returned to hell in number 50. Now he's back on Earth and few things seem to have changed. The plot with Wynn looks like it's in a deadlock. The comic is really revolving around one guy. Please speed things up. Bring new characters like Al's old teammates or adversaries. Bring some fresh air. I'm about to suffocate and even worse, lose interest. Thirdly, please flesh out Wanda as a character. I mean, how has she made herself conspicuous since number 1? As a mournful widow, a sweet housewife, a comforting wife, a traditional mother figure, the wife of a former assassin, a princess charming, a prey to scary nightmares, a frightened goody-goody in Rat City, an innocent victim in a horror movie. She used to use her brains, but her role helping Terry against his attackers going through the CIA files wasn't so convincing. This hadn't struck me until Terry called her in number 66, and she goes, "Terry, is that you?" If I didn't know any better, I'd call her a naive bimbo. Honestly, don't you think the way she's depicted, she'd be the kind of housewife who'd stand up against Spawn-type comics and watch soap operas? I'm not asking you to make a bad girl or a femme fatale of her, but make her character more three-dimensional. Stop showing her exclusively as a housewife. Take no offense, though. Your book is still number 1 after Savage Dragon, and you're a great guy. But don't forget Spawn is a comic book, not a toys catalog or a Spawn the comic movie spinoff. P.S. Man, that Capullo guy is good. Spawn Bible, then Creech. How many pages does he turn out a day? Do you add to his pencils a few details when you ink? Does he even eat, sleep, or live? Can you speak French? Keep on and take care, and thanks for those 66 books. Christopher Cuck.
Wow.
It's probably Cuke because C-U-Q.
So first off, I'm going to say a couple things in response to that before we hear the Todd Father's response. As usual, I've got my own. First off, kid, don't trip over your trench coat. Second of all, I mean, he's not wrong about Wanda.
This
and
kid's going to love The Matrix.
Dimension. He is. It's going to be a lot for him. For her now, if you really love The Matrix, it's a Matrix joke. You get it. So Malbolge is the 8th level of hell. That comes from Dante Alighieri, the Divine Comedy. That is not Todd making that up. As much as it is Todd making up Malbolgia and like all that stuff. It's not. It's based on a thing, much like calling God is based on a thing. Also, if you think this book is proselytizing to you, what do you believe?
Yeah. Todd says, "Thanks for sending me the article from France. My wife and I had a good time when we were over there in Paris. I'll get a translation of the article from my dad, who's French-Canadian, and he'll tell me exactly what the article said. To answer some of your questions, you're right. I'm not a believer in the faith, but that doesn't preclude me from putting ideas out there that are commonplace within our society, such as those based on religion or science. Every culture has a deeper kind of interest in terms of what it's like in the afterlife. Using God in a comic book is the equivalent of good, and hell is the equivalent of evil. So again, there's more generic meanings overall to me than the specific feel of who they are. Also, the name Malbolgia isn't meant as the bad dude. To me, Malbolgia isn't Satan. I think you're placing that name on him. I never stated that he is the devil. Although I have stated that he is a devil, much like the Bowery and a Bowery.
Well, that's more fair to even biblical, like further like Christian theology and stuff.
I just like that it's a frequent thing that Todd comes.
Devil.
Yeah. To me, there's multiple layers of them out there that fight amongst themselves and are trying to grab supremacy. If Spawn was to beat Malebolgia, maybe in issue 200, he's going to find that Malebolgia. It's so funny because Al's not even going to make it to issue 200, but he's going to find that Malebolgia is like a kindergartner compared to the big guy. Would I call any of that subliminal stuff? No, not really. I'm just doing stuff like presenting doctors, lawyers, and mechanics in my comic books. I don't do any of those occupations. I've even put insurance men in my comic books, and I really don't believe in that. Let me tell you. I still, based on current events.
Canada.
Based on current events.
Land of universal healthcare.
Where was Spawn on, where was Al? Oh, God. Where was Todd on December 4th? Was he in Midtown? Wow. As for Wanda, we'll be flushing her out in both the Curse of the Spawn and the Spawn series and give her more prominence starting with number 75. And she'll be playing a big part in the HBO second season of the series, so watch out for her. Thanks for your comments. I don't mind a little bit of criticism. Thanks for writing and take care. Pretty normal Todd response. Another letter kind of goes through like, I've always thought when the day came and I chose to write to you, it would be in order to give praise and salutations and continual quality of your work. Unfortunately,
praise and salutations.
That is not what this letter is meant to address. I'm writing in regards to the lukewarm, unimaginative storylines you've been putting out in Spawn 60 through 67. Let's review, shall we? Issue 60, Spawn beats up the clown. How many other issues does that happen in? Issue 61, Spawn discovers Chapel didn't kill him. Interesting, but not very action-packed. Issue 62, Spawn threatens Jason, runs into Angela, stops a mugging, finds his face healed. Once again, interesting, but boring. Issue 63, Spawn wants to reunite with Wanda and kill Jason. Ooh, there's a new idea. Wasn't this covered in issue 1? Issue 64, Spawn threatens Jason. Yawn, nothing new here. Issue 65, Spawn's life story. Interesting if you're a new reader. Boring rehash if you're a collector. Issue 66, Spawn is unhappy with his present life situation and Cyan throws a fit. Do the new ideas or action ever quit? Finally, the proverbial last straw. Issue 67. Sam takes a dump, a bum sucks some spit, and Spawn gets shot after a religious debate. Is this the kind of quality Spawn fans have come to expect from you? I think not. I remember going to my local comic book store and Spawn comics would be sold within the hour of their arrival. Now you can't give them away. I understand that you're very busy with the promotion of your movie, cartoon, toys, and your many other projects. But I would ask you, beg, that you take a moment to remember those who've helped you become the success you now are, the fans. Despite the harsh tone of this letter, I do want you to know that I still think you're a genius and wish you continued success in all of your endeavors. If for some reason you decide to print it, could you please tell me if you have any interesting future plans for Spawn so that I might influence some of my friends to start collecting again, due to the fact that some of my friends have either stopped collecting or are considering it? P.S. Greg Capullo's art rules. Sincerely, your fan, Ernest, age 27, Jacksonville, Florida.
Wow, that could have been Ernest P. Worrell Jr.
Yeah.
Just want to say...
Ernest goes to the comic book store.
Oh, God. Wow, that'd be cool. Wow, we miss him. I just want to say, first off, kid, it takes us hours to do what you just did, so don't feel good about it. You just blew through what could have been so much content for your podcast, breaking down all that shit, and you just blasted through it in a matter of moments. Yeah, what a waste of good listening time. Do not have an eye for what would be great radio, Ernest. Other than that, I mean, I thought some of those stories were actually pretty good. The one with Spawn's face was pretty cool. I think this is probably tough if you're going through it month by month in a lot of ways, because we went through 4 issues in 2 episodes and it was like 2 arcs. That would have been 4 months of reading and waiting for someone. Yeah. I get why it doesn't feel like... It feels for sure like that could have been a 2-issue story. Also,
Ernest here is 27 years old. That means you've been buying Spawn since you were 21. You've been buying Spawn for your entire 20s. Maybe it's just time to stop.
Maybe you're 27 now.
Yeah, that's all
and Spawn isn't that good unless you're 14 or 41.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
No, it's good at any age.
Todd doesn't have anything too exciting to say. He does just explain how comic books work, and that like sometimes you have to like rehash old information because like if Batman catches the Joker, then like
There's no more
that's
Batman
it.
and Joker
Yeah,
stories.
like you just have to. He has to keep fighting the Joker, so that shit's gonna keep happening. And so the rest of this is just like, I guess Todd had asked in a Wizard article like what keeps people reading comics, and so somebody responds like, "Oh, I loved the Spider-Man clones," and
Wow.
but this kid is 22, so would have been the perfect age for the Clone Saga. So if they're 22 in 1998, they are 16.
Like 17.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, 16.
So, and then we're going to go spawn number 70 in the spawning ground. Mostly people are saying that the art's really cool. Followed you since the Batman days to Spidey now Spawn. Tip your hat off to you. There's a really, really like long one about a guy who wants to get his kid into comics, and he had been picking up Spawn since the very beginning. He said, my son knew who Spawn was, but since I didn't buy comics anymore, Spawn was replaced by Power Rangers and Beetleborgs. There's no accounting for taste. He just kind of rips into his...
That's like the opposite fucking thing, man. He doesn't want to watch Predator. He wants to watch fucking Barney. What's wrong with this little dickhead?
I showed him the Spawn toys, but could never really generate any lust in his little body for Spawn like I had. That is until the movie came out. That's when he decided he wanted Spawn added to his Christmas list. My son. I always knew there was hope for him. First Batman, then Spawn. Obi's still my beating heart. Now, if only I could get him into the Lone Ranger and Tonto, my training would be complete. Then he complains about how collectors are snapping up all of the... I know, it's very weird. Listeners, George is making a face.
I'm making a stank face.
Yeah.
Not the kind you hear when you hear a great riff, the kind when you smell a stank.
He haunted every toy store in a 50-mile radius for Spawn, and he couldn't find any Spawn like figures. Like he could find Jason Wynn and like Jessica Priest, but he couldn't find Spawn because collectors were snapping him up, and he ended up buying the movie Spawn from a collector.
Yeah, man. Tom McFarlane created the adult collector toy.
And then he pitches him.
That's what happened.
And then he pitches him a bunch of ideas like, how come you don't do like a non-gruesome Spawn teaching or telling kids to read poster so that they could buy that at the Scholastic Book Fair?
I don't know, man. Why are you a fucking cuck right now?
Why?
Like, just grow up.
No, that was the French guy.
You're right. I'm sorry. Kook.
Why don't you get your comics into H-E-B grocery stores? They don't sell them, and that's the larger employer in Texas. I should know. I work for them. Coastal and Circle K carry Spawn, but Walden Books doesn't. However, Walden did carry the Spawn reprint. He just gets this
really granular. First off,
this letter is this.
I
long.
want to respond to this. My God! First off, Walden Books is a Christian bookstore. Was like specifically a Christian-owned bookstore. Of course, they didn't carry fucking first run of Spawn, dog. Second off, Todd McFarlane isn't the distributor.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Right.
Is that the distributor at this point
doesn't go to those places.
Diamond Comics.
Yep. Anyway, this guy apparently does drawings for his son and then makes copies of them so that his son and his friends can color them in, which I guess that's a nice thing to do. His next project is Spawn versus the Violator. He says, I just have to be careful in my rendering so as not to freak out his teachers. Otherwise, they may shut down my subversive antics.
This dude is like
he says
one
also,
sentence away. Go ahead.
He says after you get through running your animated Spawn on HBO, is there any chance of getting it on the Fox network? Believe it or not, there are kids that don't have HBO or VCR. Amazing, ain't it? But if our kids could see your hero instead of those cheesy cartoons of X-Men and Fantastic Four, they would generate more interest in your comics. I admire your desire to keep a lid on quality through your comics, movie, cartoon, and toys. But would it really be selling out to put your show on Fox? Also, I bought the Spawn soundtrack. I was going to use it for inspiration while I did my little drawing of Spawn, and then I was going to give the tape to my son. I listened to each and every song. It gave me a headache, so I put on Garth Brooks and got the picture done. Maybe if I was 17, I would have liked it, but I haven't been 17 in 23 years. I gave the tape to a friend of mine who's into grunge. My son has never forgiven me. In the movie, I was able to tune it out by watching the movie. I'm a Spawn fan, but not that much of a fan. Well, sir, I've wasted enough of your time and mine. I don't know if this will ever get to you, and if it does, if you'll do what I ask. But I really wish you would do something about those damn collectors. I really like my idea, and I hope you honestly think about it before you blow it off. Thank you for your time and consideration. My best to you and your family. It doesn't matter if I don't hear from you or if nothing changes with your toys. I will keep drawing my stories of Spawn and spreading the word. Till then, make mine image. Sincerely, John Caldwell. And
that is the most boomer letter that has ever been written or published. It might as well, God, it was one sentence. I was waiting for him to be like, and then my son will be with me at the strip club, and then we'll be watching porn together. And just like, what do you think? There's no difference between any two things to this guy, except for Garth Brooks and nu metal. What do you think was on the soundtrack? He bought the tape.
I don't know.
Did he think that it was going to be like Garth Brooks? Because I'll tell you this, I didn't think it was going to be Garth Brooks. I thought it was going to be fucking like Korn and Stabbing Western and all the shit that it was. I have so much to say to this fucking weirdo. I'm losing my mind. He wants Spawn from HBO on Fox. Also, you don't own a VCR in 1998? It's almost DVDs, brother.
Yeah. Well, kids don't have VCRs, George. That's what he said. Believe it or not, kids don't have HBO or VCR.
But your kid wouldn't have any of this adult shit if you weren't forcing it on him. Come on, don't you like Spawn? Don't you like all this gory, weird Spawn shit? And the kid's like, I like Spider-Man.
I want to watch a Beetleborg.
This is the worst father in America. This is the military dad of fucking comic dads. Like
he does mention earlier in the letter that he is divorced and that trying to find toys for Christmas is the hardest thing a divorced dad has to do. So
that is,
yeah,
I'm speechless.
Todd is just polite about all of his ideas and is like not going to do those. Sorry, but also he says that was a very thorough letter.
It was, dude.
The only other cool thing in the back matter is there's like these like cells from the show, and like cool. And like some breakdowns of like the making of the show, which is really cool. This is some of the stuff that you can only get by having the single issues, and if you find them in dollar bins, I really do recommend just kind of grabbing them because if you like Spawn, because there's just fun stuff. And then the back cover is
Korn.
Korn is coming, and I believe that would be with the album that Greg Capullo did the art for.
You know what that means? Freak on a Leash. Speaking of the freak, I'm feeling like a freak on a leash. That's exactly right, because that's the song that was from.
Yeah,
the song that the album was. You know what I mean? I'm tired. So,
final thoughts, George.
Final thoughts. John, whatever the fuck, Caldwell just melted my mind with how boomer that letter was. He might as well. I just even like very best to you and yours, dear sir, at the fucking end.
I hope you take my ideas, but also I understand if you do not take my ideas.
But I will be voting for another person if you don't take them.
I'll buy Wildcats toys.
Final thoughts on the issue is on the issues. This could have been a 2-part story. It had enough. If they had just, as often is the case, if you had trimmed out all the stuff that was kind of boring and repetitive and just trimmed it down to 2 killer issues, that would have been great. That said, you said it before we started recording. These issues are somewhat hard to read and really easy to understand.
Yeah.
Like, they're a little bit dense. They're a little bit blocky. But when you actually just dig into the art and kind of go off the vibes more than anything and let the captions just kind of work within that, there's some really cool stuff in there, and it shows the potential of Spawn as a horror character more than anything.
I think there's some really there are some iconic panels in these 2 issues, and that's awesome.
Some great Greg Capullo art. There's a reason every letter is like, and also Greg Capullo fucking rules.
Every letter is like, Todd, what the fuck? But also Greg Capullo's great. Which that's why Greg just does this book for a really long time, right? And we say it all the time that he's great. I mean, iconic covers on kind of on both of these. The cover for 69 is Sam and Twitch with Spawn over their shoulders, moving him, and I don't feel like the Spawn universe is like growing all that much, but I do feel like Spawn's becoming a little bit more confident as a character. I think Todd's getting a little bit more confident in like how to write him. This does feel like an arc you could have thrown like in the first 20 issues.
Right.
And it would have fit fine.
I mean, in a way, they kind of did.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And so, right. So it is, but it's weird to see a writer progressing however slowly, but like realizing that they can go back to the well, they can kind of retell an old story, but kind of try to make it better. He does say in one of the letters, and I kind of skipped over it, where the kid is like, "Oh, you just told us the origin again." He goes, "I told the origin again, but I explained a couple of things that you didn't know. So like if you paid attention, like I did give you some details that were not."
If that kid listened
before.
to Spawnography, he would have known we covered a lot of it.
Boy, I really hope that somebody who listens to the show is somebody who wrote a letter. That would be incredible.
If you ever wrote a letter to Spawn and got it published,
if you can
let
prove
us
it,
know.
you have to be able to prove it.
Yeah, we
somehow.
want to see your driver's license and your social security number and at least one credit card.
Yeah.
And then maybe we'll let you through.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, these 4 issues they're 4 issues. I like where they land. I'm excited moving forward. Next up, we've got another 2-parter in issue 71 and 72. Apparitions and Bloodless. So, excited to see what that is. And
Yeah. Hell yeah.
If you like the show, please rate, review, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. You can leave comments on Spotify, YouTube. You can subscribe there. I know we have like 13 or so subscribers there. A bunch of followers on the other platforms. Please, the reviews really, really, really help. If you can write a few words as well, I think that really goes a long way to prove to people that it's not just us asking our families to give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. But most importantly, show to other Spawn fans. That's really, really helpful. You can find us at Spawnography on most things. You can email us at spawnographypod@gmail.com. Before we head out, George, you have a recommendation for the good listeners today.
Let's see. What's my recommendation?
If you need a second, I have one.
You go first. I'll go ahead and I've got a few things floating around.
I teased my recommendation at the top of this episode when you were denigrating Steely Dan, but there's a documentary. It's called Yacht Rock, the documentary on HBO Max. That's all about how the term yacht rock was from that comedy series that came out in like the mid 2000s. But the evolution of the sound and how yacht rock is good. And I love Steely Dan, and I'm not ashamed of that. And you should.
There's a very popular Athens cover band called Yacht Rock Review for a long time.
They were probably great. For my birthday, I'm going roller skating, and it's yacht rock night.
Oh man, I just can't get on the yacht with you, dog. I'm so sorry. Here's what I'm going to recommend: listen to some fucking Judas Priest
to balance out the yacht rock.
Listen to some fucking Judas Priest. Listen to some Motorhead. Hell, get some Danzig in there if you're feeling a little too gay. Just really rip it up. Throw on something that feels like leather. Shred it out. That would have made John Caldwell real angry to hear. Turn down that Motorhead.
Thinking like Christopher Cross?
Christopher Cross, Peter Cetera. This is what I'm talking about. Steve Winwood. These are the voices
Kenny Loggins.
that we need to. Kenny. Oh man. Actually, a couple of Kenny Loggins songs really rock. Like just inexplicably, like really go.
Also, Kenny Loggins when he was young is pretty hot.
He was pretty hot. He was. You know who? You know what? Greg Sestero from The Room. Look at a picture of him in The Room and look at a picture of Kenny Loggins, and you'll be like, "Wow, that's a very similar person's face."
All right. Well, that's another episode of Spawnography. George, for Todd So Loved the World.
He gave his only begotten spawn.
See you later, Hellspawn.